beautiful old car chassis rust away and slowly become one with nature.
Over the past half-century, urbanization, digitization, and migration have transformed the world. In short, it has become globalized. Everywhere, except perhaps here in Cuba.
In the past,
this is a land apart, on the sidelines, frozen in time since the Cold War, a place where history has been slowed down by almost 60 years of revolution and the effects of an embargo imposed by its powerful
Over the last few
American
years,
neighbor.
the wind has changed. Car cemeteries are disappearing one after another. It's a shame. These places draw us by the monstrous beauty of the carcasses
But
and the
today,
surprising
America
way
is
they
back.
are transformed.
Barack Obama paid a visit to Raul Castro.
Enthusiasts,
A historic
heritage
handshake followed.
specialists,
Fidel
collectors,
himself has fallen
artists,
silent. A
photographers,
page has been
and wreck
turned,
hunters
the economic
are
blockade
all
is
ardent
over,
defenders
Cuba
of
has
these
rejoined the
sleeping
rest of the
beauties.
world, and is now undergoing another, smaller revolution, this time a multifaceted one.
It's a whole part of the heritage which is
Havana will be restored and rehabilitated. It will be reborn like a
Three
phoenix.
quarters of the car.
I'm living off the embargo today. It's thanks to that that I have all these cars in my own business.
Well, it's really something, this.
We need to grow up
It
economically,
could have been
socially,
recovered into a
culturally.
scrap.
That's the future.
It's really a very big part of my life.
If I had to do it again, I'd still be Cuban.
Me too.
Having stayed away from the excesses of overconsumption, is Cuba the sanctuary of
See all
Caribbean
of
culture?
this.
Has its heritage been better preserved, or has it in fact
Here they were
deteriorated?
just front-wheel drive.
That's life.
It was awful. I just kept one old front-wheel drive for the parks because I've got another that's the same. You see, they were lined up one after the other. Well, it's a real shame. Before you could see it was a 51.
To understand these
Terminals
changes,
on the
our trip
dashboard.
begins in the historic
I see
neighborhood
they've
of
been
Old
taken.
Havana. This is where a different revolution began, that
Someone
of
must have got
tourism.
them.
The old Cuba of the 1950s has become a saleable asset. Che Guevara, the icon of revolutionary socialism, is all the rage amongst North Americans, with Canadians at the front of the queue. Americans are also showing up in numbers, following in Hemingway's footsteps
This is
to the
all to do
Bodeguita
with the
del Medio,
ecologists.
where now you have to pay to take a photo.
If you talk to them about old cars, it's oh no. They talk about
You can't film here. No filming.
Don't understand.
3
There are
million
people who
visitors
love
this year,
old
twice as
cars.
many as there were 15 years ago.
They're partly to blame for me going bust, truth be told. By spoiling such a collection. They think that the oil can still leak and so forth and so on.
The tourists are a godsend. Here in Cuba, we welcome everyone who comes. We open our arms and our hearts to them.
The ecologists had already got rid of it before we got the idea to ask, look, where will the heritage be?
Being Cuban is a real pleasure because we have the blessing and protection of El Comandante.
The heritage people were
Today,
angry with me
he allows
because
us to be
they
what
wanted
we
to
want
keep
to
the
be.
site of the old cars. But it was too late. Even now, when I talk about it, I don't feel good. I get upset. I had this German who came looking for a car because he wanted to take one up to his flat. In the tower block. I don't know what for. But he kept aside one room, and he wanted the car to stay the way it was. It's a big job to take a car apart and then put it back together
Tourism
in one
is indeed
room.
a godsend for Cuba, since it has been the island's chief source of revenue since the withdrawal of Soviet aid in 1990. And Havana's colonial neighborhood has had a makeover. The project began
Many
in the
newspaper and
1980s,
magazine
creating a
articles,
unique
as well as
example of
books,
urban
have recorded
regeneration.
Michel Martin's adventure. Thanks to journalist
As
and
you
wreck
know,
hunter Jean-Pierre
The
Rossin.
Old Square is a special
I mean,
piece.
OVA magazine devoted several front covers to him.
These are the last priorities of the renovation program.
I brought back a souvenir here from the past. There are quite a few. Look,
Patricia
here's
Rodriguez
another line with all
runs the
those
City
photos.
Heritage Office. She is supervising the
As a
renovation
rule, we
program.
tried to put all the same kinds of car together.
And this one here was recovered by the Austrian.
Yes, by the Austrian.
The Austrian who was making a kind of wrecker's yard at his place in Austria.
Yes, that's it. But it wasn't a wrecker's yard. What did he call it?
Yes, it
This
was
is
an
what the
open-air
old square
museum.
looked like
Yes,
at the
an
end of the
open-air
1970s.
The Austrian, what he wanted was the moss.
Leave the moss there.
And this is what
he
it
said?
has
That's
become.
it.
In the end, it's not so bad, though.
The Old
They
Square
can
is
still be
the
said.
perfect illustration of the
Why has all this
philosophy
disappeared?
the historians
For
of
some
the
ecological
trying to
reason?
introduce in the old
I ask
center.
myself. We spend tens,
It's a
even
concept
hundreds
of
of
global
thousands of dollars
development
storing
so that all
amphora,
city departments
castles.
can be
Why
together in the
not
same
bring back
place.
these pages of history in a museum? Why not recreate
For
part of our
example,
industrial
where that
heritage
flag
so it
is,
can be seen and
that's the
visited?
primary school that looks over the square.
This
And
is
the
what
first thing we
Klaus
did
Koch,
here was to
known as
take
the
back
Austrian,
public
is trying to do.
the space for social activity.
It's a 5-horsepower
For us,
show.
that's fundamental.
And it was made in
And
1990.
as such,
He's talking
as you go around the
1919.
square,
It might be a bit
you can
early.
see that there are
Start of the
museums,
1920s,
stores,
1920, 21,
cultural
5
institutions, and
Yes, in the
offices too.
1920s. Yes, that
And on the
building
other
was a
floors,
six-story.
there's
12
also
six.
social housing. This is a project that
12
has an extremely important social function.
First, that's the cylinder head, which should be inside.
Ah, it's a 6-cylinder.
6.
Did you drive it?
Yes, I did. I drove it for 15 years. I'm not a specialist.
We can go and look at
this is a
that
little
building.
bit
It's
better.
an extraordinary little palace from the 18th century. Hello.
But this is interesting. It's a six.
It was restored and transformed
I
into a
bought
small
6
hotel.
cars 2 years ago.
It's a very typical
now
construction of the
last
80s.
3 or 5 cars. And
I knew
think
this
it's
building
enough.
when it was practically destroyed.
Too expensive.
It was a little car repair workshop.
Person. It's a hobby.
The patio was
He's a
totally
really
closed off.
unusually keen enthusiast. Klaus has this great project which is to create a
There was a
museum of all
huge
these cars,
that went
which he'll
right
leave
across
just
the
as
whole
they are.
building.
I find
It's
that
used to
incredible.
transport
If I was
motors
as
for
mad as
cars and
Klaus, I'd
trucks.
do the same
Repair
thing.
them
But
here.
I don't think my wife
place
would
was
let me
totally
keep these
spoiled.
kind of cars in our garden.
And you can see today that it's become a little piece of paradise.
I think it was the last car in Polizo. It's a last car of a long story.
Aquí estamos en una zona que
This
nosotros
is an
llamamos la
area we call the
zona
border zone.
de frontera
Oh,
o
that's
zona
heavy.
de
And by
transición,
that I
vamos
mean
a
a
decir,
transitional
porque
zone.
After
la
12 hours of
restauración se
operation, Klaus
organiza
Koch
y tiene
arrives
un
home
derrotero
gradually
que va
going to spread out.
close to the
avanzando como una
border with
mancha de
Hungary.
aceite. Entonces, hay zonas donde
We can
Turn,
clearly
turn,
see
turn.
that this
I've
area
done this
isn't
before.
yet completely renovated.
suficientemente la rehabilitación. Se ha hecho lo que
Welcome
hemos
to
podido
Austria.
hacer.
After the long journey from Poliso to Regensburg.
Bueno, puedes ver, tiene
You
las
can see the arcades,
las
the glass
velas,
roofs,
todo
the
con
ironwork.
This is a collection of
All
different
these
vehicles
original
which are
structures
saved
and
from
this
car
wood
cemeteries
fitting
in
in the
Europe.
entrance are
This
original
car came from
and
Poliso
allow us
this
to
year.
date this building.
These 2 cars came from Germany. This old panhard also came
Y
from
este es un
Poliso.
edificio para
I got it 2
restaurar.
years ago,
This
and the
one
Mercedes
will
was
be
saved from
destroyed.
Germany.
It will be renovated because we can readily save it.
Se hicieron algunas
We've already
acciones
carried out emergency
emergencia.
This
repairs
is
at
an
the
old
building
five
as it
horsepower
collapsed.
Peugeot from Poliso, which we
We've
also
consolidated the
saved.
structure.
We're trying to preserve it as best we
de
can
carácter
with its rust
estructural.
and its moss, and so that it looks like a complete car, though of course it'll never drive
Es
again.
fundamental que la vida
It's
permanezca
essential
en
that
el
life
centro
goes on.
Klaus
histórico.
places the
porque,
cars he has
un
saved
centro
with his
histórico,
Because the
friends
old town
and on
is
his
no
own
longer
land,
inhabited.
which is already
It
almost
loses
full.
its reason for being.
pierde su
It will
Over
lose
the
its
last
soul.
20 years,
The
I've gathered and
inhabitants
collected
guarantee
between
its
70 and 90 wrecks
way
from
of
all
life
over
and
Europe,
customs.
in very different
And
conditions,
cultural exchanges
covered with
between
moss
those who live here
or in
and the
perfect
tourists
driving
who come
order.
must be
I've
preserved.
dismounted entire vehicles,
That's the challenge.
and I'd like to open a kind of outdoor museum to display the cars just as they are, as witnesses of an era. There are less and less car cemeteries. Young people inherit them, but they're not interested in old cars, so everything gets scrapped and the witnesses are gone.
Vintage is in fashion. But the irony of the story is that the American
Weathering
car has
alters
become
the
the
patina
emblem
of
of the
car
rebirth
bodies.
of Havana.
Klaus is amazed at the unexpected shades that are revealed thanks to rain, snow, and wind. With warmth and humidity, mushrooms flourish as if by magic on the
These
old bed.
Yank tanks have become cult objects. They are part of Cuba's heritage, and it's illegal to export them. In Cuba,
whole range
motor
of
mechanics is a
live
passion
and
as much
shelter
as it is a
these old
necessity.
carcasses.
This one has a problem with the steering.
Santiago is one of those magicians who, for decades, has been keeping these classic cars on the roads.
The cars here need to be maintained. We can't let them fall apart.
1 hour from Guts,
Some
in a
parts have
place
been
he
lost,
keeps
so we need to
secret,
replace
Klaus
them with
has made
others.
an unusual discovery.
I found this
Find
marvelous
any
car
old motor,
cemetery about
if it
2
works,
years ago.
you go with
I'm
it.
trying to buy it and save some of the vehicles because I hardly have any room left on my land.
These cars that you see make a lot of smoke. They're almendrons, collected taxis. They have gearboxes from all kinds
For
of trucks.
years, the owner
And
of
even
this
tractor
wrecker's yard,
engines.
now deceased, piled
They're
up cars in
almendrons,
several
and that's what you
layers.
see in Havana. Collected taxis, really
But in
beat up.
making sure the piles were stable, unfortunately the roofs of a lot of vehicles were crushed. Walking around the rows,
Before,
you can find
the whole
Czech,
garage was full of Soviet motors.
English,
And now,
American,
they're all American. The cars have changed.
and even some
Everyone who
French
comes here wants to
cars.
find original motors. That's totally new in the past couple of years. Now it's crazy. It's like we're going back in time. Everyone's
Many are
looking
from
for
the
original motors.
1950s,
Look at
when
these
car
pistons, they're
chassis had a
American.
graphic beauty
Look,
that
you can
has
get hold
since
of
been
them.
unequaled.
Look, it fits perfectly. I'm still going to keep the Soviet motors for the future in case we have to put them back in.
This rust paradise
Here,
is a
you never know
refuge and
what's
shelter for many animal species.
In any case, day after day, the only thing that runs in Cuba is the almendrons.
This would be the ideal place to create my open-air museum. It would be a dream come true.
Unlike
The old
France,
American cars
Eastern and
last.
Central
They just keep
European
on
countries
going.
haven't systematically got
Hundreds
rid
of
of their wreck
thousands of
cemeteries.
kilometers for these cars that
Perhaps the
survived the
French had
embargo,
trouble getting
the
over the
withdrawal of
loss of
Soviet
their
assistance,
luxury
and the
pre-war
so-called
cars.
special period
Bugatti,
which followed
Belet,
in the early 1990s.
German cars obtained the
The
high-class
almendrons
label.
that survived the tough times are
Although
still
there
here.
are many Germans to
And
defend
for a
the
few
environment,
pesos, that's how
Germany
the Cubans
adopted a
get around.
radically different approach to its automobile heritage. Michael Froelich, a real character, has opened an original car cemetery museum
Roger
near
is a taxi
Düsseldorf.
driver. His car embodies
I
the
bid you a
country's
hearty
history
welcome
and
to
its
my car
exceptional
in this
capacity
yard.
for resistance.
This is where my park of vehicles, my museum,
This one has a
automobile
Mercedes
cemetery
motor, but
starts.
it's an American Dodge.
You might be interested.
I don't think there's a single bit of
1950s
original bodywork
special.
remaining. These cars need to be totally
Economic growth
renovated
was
so they don't
strong,
fall to
cars
pieces.
became more powerful and modern, and a new era began for cars in the same year I was born.
They're good for working. They have a solid
1950
chassis
really
that can
was a
stand up to the
special
bumps and potholes. Modern cars don't have chassis like these.
Michael
They're more
Froelich has
fragile.
bought and collected a large number of cars from 1950, but he wanted to keep them as they were.
Someone who is 30, 40 or 50 years old
Prior to
scratches
1989,
and scars
there was decent
they're
public
in.
transport in Cuba.
And I think that is what nature intended.
But when that collapsed,
As you don't have to always
people
be
got out their old almond drums.
especially since a person has to live, and cars too must live.
That's what launched the almond drums.
And for me, a car is especially beautiful when you can see it.
We have very
driven,
basic needs.
got wet, and
There is
been
very little
dry.
public transport.
Has a scrape or two.
There's one. But you don't know when the next one will come.
To bring out the wrinkles, Michael Froelich has his own technique.
An unusual sight. I bought this car from someone who had restored it perfectly,
Yes, that's perfect. Thanks. Have a nice day.
but it was too beautiful. Then I had the idea of putting
Does the
milk
country
cream
operate
cheese
like an
on the car
almendron?
to attract birds. so they'd walk and leave droppings on
worse.
it. And this worked so well that it ended up looking as old as the other cars.
It's worse. The island gardens have an owner that looks after them and improves them and uses them as a business. Granted, we have economic problems, but it's not just that. I think you also need to show an interest. You need to be motivated. Do you know what I mean?
In Cuba, the metaphor is an art one uses to get around censorship. In any case, the revolution continues. According to the walls of Havana, there's no retirement for these old automobiles.
This is the center of Havana, with the old city on the right. This is the tourist area. After the stoplight, it's half tourists, half Cubans. These are cars for tourists. Most of them are convertibles. Do you like the pink ones or the yellow ones?
Aquí. Esta cosa bonita.
Beautiful, isn't she?
Para los turistas.
She's for tourists.
Por eso está tan arregladito, tan
That's why
bonito.
she's in such great shape.
Este detalle aquí, mira.
They're almost always convertibles.
Intencionalmente le
Look,
cortaron el techo.
they cut the top off because
Hicieron
this model
descapotable,
wasn't a
pero
convertible.
originalmente no es descapotable. Así que parece un
It's
museo.
like a museum.
Pero
Look
mira
how
si son
lovely
bonitos.
they are.
Mira,
Look at that.
mira qué belleza. Que te cuente
How
cosas de
much
estos
would that
coches.
one cost? 20,000?
20.000.
Look, 20,000 CUC.
Todo este material
All this
es
looks
nuevo.
new.
Lo enchapan aquí, por encima de la defensa.
They put plates
ponen
on,
chapas de acero
then
inoxidable.
stainless steel on top, and you think it's
Parece
new.
nuevo. Pero
But
esto
it
no
isn't.
es. Este sí vale 20.000.
This one, yes,
Estas cosas
she's
son
worth
originales de ellos,
20,000.
¿ves? Eso es lo bonito
That's
de estos
original.
carros, de que tengan sus cosas
They're
originales.
lovely, solid,
Sí,
shiny
es
objects.
impresionante, pero no le
You
dejen
can't
mérito
deny
al
it, it's
carro.
impressive.
Mérito
But
lo
it's not the
tenemos
cars
nosotros,
that deserve the
porque
praise.
ningún
It's
carro dura
us.
60 ni
Because
70
no
años.
cars last 50 or 60
Hemos sido
years.
nosotros, los
We
cubanos,
Cubans struggle to
porque
keep
hemos
these
luchado
cars
por-
beautiful
por-
and to
porque se vean
maintain them,
bonitos, porque se
to
mantengan,
stop them
porque no
becoming
decaigan.
wrecks, because
Porque es
that's
lo
all
que
we
tenemos.
have.
La historia de
The
estos
story of
carros es la
these
historia
cars
de
is the
los
story
cubanos.
of
Para
us.
sobrevivir uno
We
tiene que
Cubans who
hacer
fight for
lo
survival
que pueda.
and do everything that's possible,
Y hasta lo que no.
and even sometimes the impossible.
Y eso yo creo que lo
I
sabe
think
el
all the
mundo
world
entero.
knows that.
Pero no hay que
But you
dejar
have
de
to admit
reconocer
they're
que quedan
beautiful.
bonitos.
They are real gems, dazzling, restored to be as good as new. These taxis have become the #1 tourist attraction and are good business for the owner. Trips are paid for in dollars or CUC, the second Cuban currency, invented to bring in cash with a peso index linked to the dollar. Julio Manuel had a nose for a smart move. He set up a customized taxi agency for foreign customers, a success story with a flavor of the American dream.
Here, we redo all the interiors, and we make them ourselves our own way. And all that is done here with technology that is more than 50 years old. It's an old Singer machine from the 1940s. We're artists. We don't repair cars, we bring them back to life. Here, we restore everything. It takes 7 or 8 months. The dashboard is almost original. The steering wheel, too. The gauges and the radio are original. But the former owner changed lots of things. So we're going to replace them with new parts that I'm importing directly from the USA. This whole part, rub it all down well. The private sector has opened up in Cuba, so I got into business in Cuba. I started out with a '55 Chevrolet that I inherited from my family. It was beautiful and it brought me customers. Business took off, and today I've got lots of old cars I've restored. All these cars are like my children, and I won't sell them when I finish them. This one coming now is the latest baby that I've just finished, Chevrolet Impala from 1960. The last year when American cars came into Cuba. It's a pleasure to drive. It's perfect. I love it. It's the tops. Tomorrow it'll start work as a taxi. I only got to enjoy it for a couple of weeks. Tomorrow it'll get its new driver and we'll move on to another project. This is Revolution Square. This is where the big Cuban government ministries are. You can see all the tourists who come here by car. It's a symbol of Cubania, and we have to maintain this tradition. I think that the reason these cars are still around isn't thanks to the revolution. The revolution is one of the reasons, but the main reason is the American embargo on Cuba for more than 50 years. We weren't allowed to bring in cars. I'm living off that embargo now. Thanks to the embargo, I have these cars that are still going, and I built up a business. Without them, I'd have had another business. Who knows? But that's how it is. And so I have my cars. I think that we Cubans now have the chance to change the way we think.
Roger is continually asking the question, pesos or dollars? Almendron or tourist taxi? It's not easy to enter the market economy.
I need to make a lot of modifications. Make her prettier, polish her up, make her shine, cut off the roof and maybe even change the engine. Because for tourists, you don't use diesel engines. The original petrol engines are better.
You'd have to replace that, wouldn't you?
No, that's nothing. We can put back some iron, plate it with steel, and then repaint it. But I like her like that. I'm very fond of her. A little paint here, and that's all. She's not ugly, is she? Is she ugly, or just in bad condition?
This city, founded 500 years ago, is one that Patricia would like to make eternal.
I love my city. I was born here, and for me it's the most beautiful city in the world, no question. We managed to ensure our city is being preserved, and today we're going to renovate it and it will be reborn from the ashes like the phoenix, with all these wonderful buildings that will be restored.
To do this, Patricia is counting on the School of Artisans, directed by Juan Carlos Botello.
Botello, darling, how are you?
We're molding the support for the lantern of the Capitol. This part here will go in the center of the lantern.
And how many pieces do you need to go around?
30.
30.
Come and look at these moldings for the Paraguay Salon. These are the flower motifs for the main portico. Some of them were damaged.
The ones at the top of the steps?
On the Capitol, yes.
And this piece in stone will replace it. The workshop school is a crucial establishment. Without this school, it would be impossible to do the restoration, both in the Old Town and elsewhere in Havana. This knowledge had virtually disappeared. There were only a few craftsmen we managed to find in the 1990s, so we started then to train the trainers.
I always say this is not a place. It's not a group of people. The workshop school is a concept that goes beyond the framework of the school, because we are training students, and that creates a chain. By training young people in these old crafts, all this knowledge is given back to the people. That knowledge is transmitted into the different neighborhoods and into building companies, and that's what the school does.
The Cuban capital needed a whole army of craftspeople to restore its beauty of the 1940s and 1950s. Havana was then one of the marvels of the Caribbean. Today, it is falling into disrepair. Even the Malecón, this emblematic seafront boulevard, is under threat. These bourgeois buildings from the early 19th century are collapsing.
This is Professor Andres, and here is Mr. Virado, who was one of the school's founders. In fact, the youngest of the school's founders. And this is Mr. Pedro, an engineer whose task it is to determine the state of the structure.
The Malecón is being attacked by corrosion. For the first time, the school workshop has come out of the Old Town to try and save this architectural heritage.
All these buildings have greatly deteriorated due to a lack of maintenance and having been abandoned for so many years. And it's also due to the proximity of the sea. 70 to 80% of the constructions are badly damaged. A lack of money and materials is slowing progress and aggravating the problem. It could all fall down any time.
At the top, I saw that the natural white stone is not so badly damaged. It's even compatible with the iron. So we'll see which materials are most resistant to the salt.
I think the stone that's in the sea is best adapted.
Whatever happens in future, it will be better. With the increasing number of tourists and people who can travel to take part in the renovation, all those factors can only improve the situation and help save the city.
Saving the city is the challenge. Havana and its heritage is in critical state. Another highly symbolic monument is the Capitol. It is also enjoying a facelift. It represents a huge project and a mission of the utmost importance because, after years of neglect, the Capitol will soon be home to the Cuban Parliament.
This salon is magnificent. Amaro, compared to other salons, the moldings here are in pretty good condition, right? This molding and everything you see here has been restored by the workshop school. This salon is now almost finished, and it'll be a meeting room for the National Assembly of the People. This is one of the halls we restored and are working on to make the connection with the other gallery, which is the Salon of the Senate, I think. I always get mixed up between the Assembly there and the Senate there. Before, this used to be the Natural History Museum. And when I was a child, I'd come visit the Capitol, but I never imagined that one day I'd be involved in restoring it. I remember once there was a big exhibition here about the Soviet Union. We're proud to work here because it's a building that has great value, not just for us architects, but for the country as a whole. There are many buildings close by the Capitol that are extremely valuable in heritage terms. What is interesting is the great variety you find in the architecture. There are classically inspired facades, but also Art Deco and Art Nouveau inspired buildings. The triumph of the revolution offered a wonderful opportunity to Havana, apart from any political considerations. It was of historical importance because there was a plan to demolish part of the old town. So that means if the revolution had succeeded 2 years later than it did, a large part of the city wouldn't be how it is today.
But there's a real threat, right?
Yes, of course, but I'm staying optimistic because anything is still possible. You say that 70 to 80% could end up collapsing. For example, the facades that are from the 17th or 19th century. But they're still standing. We just need to consolidate them. That's why I think the face of Havana won't change and will stay the same for a long time to come.
Convalescing after so many years of impoverishment, yet embellished by a patina of time and the spectacle in its streets, Havana possesses an irresistible charm, the beauty of a heroic city. For 10 million Cubans, romance and Cubania were ways to escape deprivation and boredom. And the Cuban people have maintained a certain self-deprecating manner.
Getting up in the morning with no money, looking for it all day, and going to bed without a cent. That's Cubania. But you're still happy.
Oh, you need 20 bucks to party.
Today, a new wind is blowing through Havana. In the old town, there's something new happening. And some are already calling it the Scissor Revolution. In this part of the Old Town that's known for its hairdressing salons, Gilberto has transformed his into a tourist destination and the headquarters of a philosophy, the philosophy of hair. And it's no laughing matter.
This is a place where art, history, and hairdressing cohabit. I started with a chair, some scissors, and hair like this, and it turned into this place. The most important thing is that it must be a living place. I think that's important. You don't cultivate cubanía, but rather a way of being Cuban. And in this critical historical period we're living through, the most important legacy is the people. Cubans have a different social structure. In our culture, we are close to one another. We help each other a lot. And you need to understand the importance of this culture and these human values we have to rethink the future. It's true that in Cuba, there are things that need to change or be improved. But we can't lose everything. It's not all about money. There are material things and there are spiritual things.
Theory and practice are just one step apart for Gilberto. A child of the revolution, this businessman shares his time between his private salon and the hairdressing school at the end of the street, where, like all the teachers, he works as a volunteer.
This is our school.
The young apprentices in this school come from the poorer neighborhoods. These ones are hard of hearing.
Cut it a little shorter. It's important. Wash and then dry. Our aim is to teach the hairdressing trade, as well as social values, and to end up providing them with a livelihood. The private sector is expanding in Cuban society, and as someone from the private sector, I think that everyone should give something back to society, whether it's money, work, knowledge, or time. It's important to create something that can be passed on. It's a philosophy that should be handed down, and others should do the same. It's important to grow economically, socially, and culturally, all at the same time. Now we're going to dance at the old people's home. It's a public health project that we help with, developing a cultural project for retired people. We dance in the style we call son. The idea is that the young people and the old people share a cultural moment involving Cuban music. The older people have to teach the younger ones. And it's an activity that the people in this neighborhood really appreciate. And anyone who wants to can join in. Are you okay? Yes, thanks be to God. Hi, how are you?
Did you like what I cooked for you last week?
Yes, it was wonderful.
I love this guy.
We're going to do the disco every Wednesday, but we're also going to organise a domino tournament with the oldies against the kids from the school. It's a philosophy, the philosophy of hair. I think it's important Starting from hairdressing, you can see that society can be changed. And I'm proud of that. It's the future.
I've always danced. I love dancing, and I still dance a lot.
It's the best party in Havana, the Son Disco. I love coming here with the older people who teach us to dance. It's great fun. Okay, see you next Wednesday.
Social and political heritage is in the Cubans' DNA. A few blocks over is the Callejón de Hamel, a pedestrian street full of surrealistic artwork. It's no longer son music you can hear, but rumba. Rumba is above all spiritual music. That of Santeria, a combination of Catholicism and animistic beliefs from Africa. Since the crisis in the 1990s, Santeria has never been so popular. In Cuba, there is the god that is Fidel, and now there is also Ochun, Yamaya, and all the other Santeria gods and saints. A little revolution that has turned the Callejón de Hamel into the place for rumba and the Afro-Cuban tradition, which is wonderful for Salvador, the creator of all these works.
I think that in Cuba, there's a very interesting thing happening, which is that there's a lot of culture with African origins that has been imported to America and the Caribbean and to Cuba, where they have survived, where they are expressed, and where they flourish. I never thought when I started this job about doing something for tourists. And I'd never have imagined that Callejón de Hamel would become so important, that it would become a temple to black culture. I'm happy because I love what I do, and because I feel black inside. Because I love my land, and I'm not a hypocrite in terms of history, and I defend Afro-Cuban values and culture. That's life.
Hello and welcome. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to our rumba group.
In this temple to Afro-Cuban culture and rumba, every weekend, the dancers introduce visitors to these African rhythms.
In Santeria ceremonies, the language spoken is known in Cuba as Yoruba. It's not really the Yoruba language that is spoken in Nigeria. It's a liturgical language, a dead language, a language that is repeated and handed down from generation to generation by oral tradition. And we preserve that language, but we don't use it. It's not like we created a language like Creole in Haiti. We still speak Spanish, but we enrich it with a few words of African origin.
Among the dancers is Cuquito, a santero who is still learning. He wears white, indicating that he is still in the initiation phase.
The year you spend in white is to purify you and make sure you get it all right. I believe in it because I've seen it since I was a kid. And because I've always been at the ceremonies when the drums and mediums predicted things that actually happened. Santeria is everywhere, in the neighborhoods, in the countryside. I can tell you that Santeria is the best thing in the world. You have to feel it, and you have to have it in your heart. Santeria means Cubania. It's 100% Cuban.
The following day, Cuquito is at home with his friends from the troupe for a party at which he is the guest of honor. He is going to become a fully fledged santero and will no longer have to wear white. The drums are there to establish the connection between the invisible world and the world of the living. These magic-filled rituals are far from the reality of socialism. Fidel Castro is said to have turned a blind eye on these practices. Some even say El Líder Máximo was cured as a child by a santero healer.
The santeros loved Fidel. He helped us when we set up the Yoruba Association. We are true Cubans, and we don't practice witchcraft as some say, but santeria. There's no harm in it.
To respect the law of the drums, and before trying to get into contact with the dead, Cuquito and Tai Rumi pray at this strange altar.
Today, it's the anniversary of the first year of a Yavo, and his saint is Chango. And that's why we've created the throne of Chango with all the saints the Yavo chose. Chango is the guardian angel, the guide. Ochun is his mother, the boss of Cuba, the queen of honey, sweetness, and gold. Obatala is intelligence, the master of our minds. And Ogun is the one that helps you when you're in hospital. They're all important in one way or another. I love this religion. I was initiated 2 years ago, and I'm a disciple of Chango and Ochun. And if you want to be initiated into the Yoruba religion, first you need to be baptized as a Catholic. You need to believe in God above all.
Through the voice of the drums, the saints call the santeros to be in communion together. And to do this, one needs to enter a state of trance, the ultimate submission of the self.
When you're initiated and you are presented before the drums, the saint who is in the drum recognizes your face thanks to your guardian angel, a medium, or your protector. And after a moment, because of the songs, you enter into a trance and into a relationship with the gods, the orishas. For me, it's very tough because you no longer feel your feet, you have no more air. It's really very powerful.
After that, the camera is no longer really welcome. The trance is a private affair.
On the road, we bumped into another group of young people who were preparing to do the same thing. It's not the only drumming ceremony happening in Havana. Every day there are 10, 30 or 40 drum ceremonies across Havana. Before, because of revolutionary ideals, people hid themselves. But in fact, Santeria has always been practiced here, even during colonial times, when we were forced to go to the Catholic Church with the Virgin of the King or Santa Barbara. There's always been Santeria. It's part of the Cuban soul.
Afro-Cuban culture, the architectural heritage, the legacy of the revolution, the desire to reintegrate into the world. Cuba is all that at the same time. At the crossroads of a history that is still being written.